Okay, thank you very much, Shelley, and greetings everybody, and thank you all for joining us. My name's Eugene Shirley, and I'm the president of Pando Populous, an organization that's dedicated to making the place where we live a community of more resilient communities. I think all of you know by now that Pando Days is a program that brings the creative and intellectual resources of higher education together from across all of Los Angeles County to focus on helping to implement the county's ambitious sustainability plan, Our County LA. In this, Pando is implementing a vision of the Chief Sustainability Officer's strategic task force for LA County. Everyone here today is part of something that's really important and unique, uniting higher ed with the insights of government agencies, community partners, and sponsors, and bringing them all together to focus on the big social and environmental challenges of our age. Unfortunately, we haven't always seen these problems with the clarity we've needed. One of the people who has been responsible for giving us clarity is our founding chair, John B Cobb Jr. John is one of the leading philosophers and theologians in the country today, who in 1969-1970 wrote the first single author book ever at the intersection of the earth and ethics called Is It Too Late? It's now more than 50 years since the book came out. John is 96, and he's writing and doing more than ever to focus attention on these issues. I've asked John to come here and say a few words to get us going this morning. John, you need to unmute there if you would.
Yeah, okay. I'm grateful for the opportunity to welcome all of you. I'm excited about what's happening. I have been, for the most part, an observer of what is being achieved by Eugene and the chief sustainability officers, and I wonder and marvel at the success. I think that last year's series was a great success, and I understand that 4 of the projects have in fact been funded. I'm also excited about the fact that in Pomona, I live in the Pomona Valley, there is talk about actually building a factory to produce tiny houses, and this also grew out of last year's series. Higher education often limits itself to developing ideas that are chiefly of interest to scholars in one academic field or another. But in Pando Days, universities have decided to devote some of their resources to helping Los Angeles County achieve the excellent goals it has set for itself in this decade. They've done brilliant work. Humanity's needs are enormous. The county's goals are ambitious. Continuing collaboration of universities, cities, counties, and business is what all urgently require. All are benefited. It is win-win-win. Pando can help make the collaboration happen. It has done so. With your help, it will happen again. Perhaps it will model a change in the way our society has too often functioned in separate ghettos. It can be the change for which it calls. Let's make it happen.
Thank you so much, John. So now let me give a brief overview of Pando Days 21, as a couple of things have changed since last year. We'll then introduce our 2 new categories and then turn things over to my colleagues, John Bielenberg and Brant Williams, who will get us going in what I've always thought to be one of the most enjoyable parts of Pando Days, which is the brainstorming work. We hope you leave today with more creative ideas about implementing sustainability in the Southland than you've ever had before, and that some of the ideas might actually serve as the germ of a project that you can take forward with your school teams. Those of you who were with us last year or for this year's launch event a few weeks ago know how Pando Days works. Schools create teams, each of which selects a challenge related to one of the goals embedded in the LA County Sustainability Plan. They then develop an initiative or campaign related to that challenge with project premieres and judging at the end. Last year, we got ingenious proposals from 10 school teams from across the Southland, as John said, 4 of which actually have been picked up with funding to move forward. This year, the major difference in how Pando Days is developing is that we're offering the school teams a set of specific challenges that have been developed in collaboration with what we call client partners. Client partners are government agencies or NGOs that have expertise in a given area and are working in that area day in and day out. They've helped us frame the challenges and provide networks, often resources such as data, etc., much like a real world client. Client partners will also judge your projects at the end of the year in their categories to decide which offers the greatest opportunity for making a difference, and they will award seed funding. So the challenges we announced at our recent launch event were these 4 that you see on the screen. LA County, which has focused its challenge around community engagement with a test case targeting EV and other mobility challenges in the city of Cudahy. Community engagement is one of the biggest challenges the county faces in terms of implementing a plan for sustainability. And so it is looking for new and more effective ways of doing it and hopes that it might be possible for you to develop a model that can be rolled out countywide. Region of Pasadena has focused its challenge around the future of mobility in the city and adjacent areas. Pasadena public agencies are interested in everything from electric buses to developing shared mobility hubs. But all these ideas beg the question of what the future of mobility in the region really ought to look like. Pico Union Housing Corporation, which is focusing its challenge around creating a pocket park in a 2,500 square foot area in South LA being given over to it by the city. The area offers far too little access to green space. And so the challenge is to create opportunities for recreation, food, culture. They're hoping you put your creative hats on and let the ideas flow. And then there's the open call for any of the Our County Sustainability Plan goals that might seem otherwise right for you. The upside of the open call, I should point out, is that it's open, like last year, and that you may choose any goal you like. But there is no client partner with the help that the client partners offer in the other categories. And there's not a sponsor for potential seed funding at the end of the year. So try and choose a category with a client partner if you can. But if you just don't see a category that fits, then the open call is for you. Create your own category according to an LA County Sustainability Plan goal and go for it. Now let's talk about the 2 new challenges. The first one is housing homeless. This comes from the mayor's office in the city of Los Angeles with out-of-the-box solutions for LA's Skid Row. Here to present this challenge is my colleague, Judith Parker. Many of you know Judith from last year as the Emmy Award-winning narrative coach for Pando Days. She's working with us very closely on the whole of the Pando Days initiative and will still be available to all the school teams to help with their individual narrative coaching this year. Judith, you and I have met together with LA's Deputy Mayor for Homelessness. So let us know how this extraordinary challenge for Skid Row is shaping up. Judith, you'll need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me? We good? Welcome, everyone, and I'm really delighted to tell you about this particular challenge because I think it's a very important one. Skid Row has been the home to persons, PEH, which stands for people experiencing homelessness for 100 years, nearly 100 years, which is extraordinary. And there are currently an estimated 2,800 unsheltered persons in the area of Skid Row. It's a growing population in desperate need of housing, hydration, hygiene, and cooling center options. Many members of the homeless community reside there in sheltered or unsheltered settings, and many more are continuously arriving from other parts of the city in search of vital services. So integrated solutions are an imperative. And the proposal that the city has given us is quite exciting. They're asking for specific locations are going to be included in the challenge, and they're asking you to create all kinds of innovative solutions to the hygiene and vital services that are needed. What already exists in Town Avenue is a sort of 24-hour shower, laundry, and restroom. More of this is needed. Cooling centers are needed. And all of this will be articulated on the website, but what's been missing in these spaces is misting systems, access to drinking water, cool places to sit. The city wants this challenge to basically to create housing and climate, green space, cooling stations. All of these things are needed. Any of them could be where you focus your challenge.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith. We're delighted to have this opportunity this year. The second of the new challenges you'll want to know about comes from the Cobb Institute based in the Pomona Valley. Here, the challenge includes housing that is affordable, but it is more broadly interested in the whole of neighborhood development in equitable and sustainable ways, envisioning the construction that's needed with local resources and labor, financing through local revenue, including perhaps a local public bank, all for an integrated vision of wealth building that deeply empowers the local community. Here to tell you very briefly about this wonderful initiative in Pomona is Michael Whitmer. Michael is a lawyer by training, was for 15 years Deputy Attorney General for the state of California, and he's now in retirement working as a community organizer focused on building more just and sustainable neighborhoods in Pomona. Michael, if you would take 2 or 3 minutes and tell us about the Pomona Challenge and why it is such a fascinating opportunity for schools.
Thank you very much, Eugene. I work with John Cobb at the Cobb Institute, and we have a philosophy of organism. And while we have that philosophical foundation, we seek to apply it in practical ways. We've been called a think tank with legs. We're committed to localism and community collaboration, but we take an integrated and holistic approach to systems change. So while our physical home base is in Claremont, we're now looking to organize a community conversation on economic revitalization in our neighboring city of Pomona. But why Pomona? Pomona is a remarkable small community of 150,000 on the eastern edge of LA County. It's an incredible place. It's on the cusp of an economic and cultural renaissance. In 2018, after a years-long community dialogue, it adopted the Charter of Compassion, the International Charter of Compassion. It's only one of 500 cities worldwide to have done so. This reflects a unique moral commitment on the part of the city's elected leadership and its people. Compassion is evident in the city's provision of homeless services where other communities shrink from that. And as a result, we've become a magnet for a lot of homeless people. The city is very inclusive culturally, but it is 70% Hispanic. And It has a culture of collaboration. It has a rich ecosystem of nonprofit organizations and churches, community activists, and it's looking for novel approaches to improving the quality of life for its citizens, and especially on preserving existing neighborhoods and avoiding displacement of existing population. The Cobb Institute is organizing an economic forum to be a 2-year community conversation, and it's described in the materials that are posted on the website here. This is a big element. Community engagement is a big element in this project. We're looking for cross-sectional integrated approaches to building 10,000 new homes under the Regional Housing Needs Assessment that we just received. 6,000 of those new homes need to be affordable. But we're not looking to just build houses. We're looking to build neighborhoods. So the forum plans to use housing as a springboard into a systems transformation discussion that'll dive deep into job creation, banking localization, and especially the policy issues on how to avoid displacing existing residents. This is a rich opportunity for lots of community engagement and university and educational institution engagement. So I really appreciate you taking a look at it.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you very much for the involvement of the Cobb Institute there. Okay, so now you all know about the challenge categories for Pando Days 21. The rest of today's program is focused entirely on getting your creative energies flowing around these challenges. The format going forward is that we'll have 2 or 3 general sessions together, interspersed with a couple of breakout working group sessions. This is when you'll be off in breakout rooms, organized by school, and working with your school teams. Some of you are with teams today that are fairly large. Some are small, maybe even one person. No worries at all. The breakout activities we do will work well no matter the size. And if your team happens to be very small, we'll do our best to supplement it with members of the Pando team. Each school team will be asked to choose one of the Pando Days 21 challenges to work on. Some teams don't know which of the challenges they would like to take on for the year. Some want to submit proposals in multiple categories, and some are thinking about working in collaboration with other schools, etc. All of that is good. But for today, by choosing a category, it's important to know that you're not locking in. You can change between now and the time in mid-April when you make your one-page project submissions. Today is about kickstarting a process that ignites your inner brainstormer, as we put it, so that as you work on your projects over the rest of this year, you'll be better equipped to come up with ingenious ideas and explore how things maybe could be different. Today is about that process. Final thing, note that when you're in your breakout rooms, and if you need help of some kind, just press the question mark button that will be at the bottom of the right-hand corner of your screens. One of us will pop in. So to lead us in the process today are my dear friends and colleagues, John Bielenberg and Brant Williams. John has spent his entire life thinking wrong about almost everything you can think of. He's bored with thinking right, so bored that he decided to write a book called Think Wrong. And the process he and Brant decided to get us to, and the process he and Brant designed to get us to think wrong today in important ways is called Think NATO, which they'll be taking us through now. John is an AIGA medalist and winner of countless design awards. Brant Williams is a serial entrepreneur and marketing strategist who has worked over the course of his career for startups and very large companies alike. He's now an adjunct instructor at Montana State and comes to us from there. John and Brant, over to you.
Thanks, Eugene. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if this works. It's great to be here. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you guys all see a white screen with Think NATO on it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. That's one of the flaws with Zoom, that you always have to ask the question when you're sharing your screen. But Brant and I are going to be taking you through this Think NATO process. And the way we think of this is we all would acknowledge that you need to move your body. You need physical conditioning. And so you have gym class in school or phys ed. There are gyms you go to work out with weights, but nobody really talks about conditioning your mind to be more creative. And I'm going to show you how our minds are actually pre-programmed to not stretch. They're programmed to follow predictable pathways, and that gets in the way of creativity. Oops. Okay. It's not advancing.
It's a pretty bell, though.
I'm going to stop the share and try again. Brant, do you want to add anything while I do this?
Yeah, while John's working with the Zoom anomalies. Yeah, so what's interesting about creative conditioning is that, you know, we came up with this process for Think NATO that allows us to create this sort of elasticity in our brains that is actually beat out of us. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But what's interesting about brain elasticity is a lot like muscle elasticity. And, you know, there's been a lot of studies talking about how it's much better to learn languages, for example, when you're young, because the brain is very elastic. And as we get older, I mean, I'm talking about older, like sixth grade, we get that elasticity is sort of worn out of ourselves. It's still there. We don't really practice it. So the idea here is that what we're going to be doing is practicing that elasticity today. And we're going to go through a little brief presentation on how we're going to go about that in a moment, as soon as we can get the slides to advance.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, no. So John, why don't you get out of slideshow? And
nothing's working.
Okay.
I took you out, John.
Okay.
Try it again.
It's always great to have when I was at Apple Computer, we used to do these very elaborate demos. And the joke was, if something can go wrong, it will when it comes to technology. And that's always the case with Zoom.
It's
working. All right. Okay. Tap dance is over. Let's go.
Thanks, Brant. Okay, I'm going to start with the good news. The future will not look like the past. I think that's good in many ways. The bad news is that the future will not look like the past. And so we've got these big global challenges, I think unprecedented in human history. The biggest kind of looming on the horizon is climate change and CO2 in the atmosphere. And you can see by this graph that it's an exponential curve. It's not just a gradual incline in temperature, right? We're going to hit what's called a hockey stick soon. We have population growth, something they predicted in the 60s and 70s, and now it's actually happening. You don't feel it so much in the United States, but globally, again, it's an exponential curve, and that's putting more pressure on the natural world, which creates this phenomenon of species extinction, mapping almost exactly to population growth. So as we have more and more humans, we're taking up more space, eliminating natural habitat for other species. Globalization, not necessarily a bad thing. What's happening is that the gross domestic product is going up all around the world. The result of that is that everybody wants all the crap that we have, and that puts more pressure on the natural environment. There's something called ecological debt, that we're using up more and more of the Earth's resources earlier in the year. So the Earth produces a lot of resources that we can access, but we're using it up earlier and earlier and going into debt. And now, as we all know, we're in a global pandemic. And I think that what this shows is that we're all connected, right? So you have a virus that originates in China, and soon the whole world is experiencing the results of that. And it just shows that we can't think independently and expect to kind of come up with global solutions. Oh, geez. I have no idea why this is happening here. Maybe stop my share again and then I'll start it up.
No worries.
I have a new computer coming. It's not here yet. Okay, are we going again?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. So really what we're talking about is going from the way things are to the way things need to be. And typically, this is what happens when someone has an idea. Brant, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. And this has happened to all of us, right? We come up with this really cool idea. We get used to, sort of cultivating it, and then we share it with somebody, our colleagues, our organization, our boss, or whatever, and just wham, everybody comes in and goes, well, you can't do that because, the lawyers won't let us do it, or, that's crazy. You can't possibly be serious, or we could never. What would our customers say? What would my teammates say? I just can't do that. That's just too risky. And so, we get shot down. We just, plain and simple, we just can't be done. So what we end up doing is we have to examine why. Why is it that we come up with ideas that get shot down naturally? And why do things exist the way they are? We're actually going to do this as an exercise in just a little bit. So why do they exist the way they are? Because examining why they are, there could be very good reasons why things are the way they are. They could be cultural, legal, they could be convention, they could be part of a community, they could be all kinds of reasons why. But a lot of times, and this is where the brain elasticity comes in, a lot of reasons why something is just because. And it's not necessarily because it's the better solution or the better idea, it just is. So let's keep going.
Okay, so we're all victims of pre-existing neural pathways. Our brains form these neural pathways over time. An example is me. I have a thought and a vocalization. I don't have to create that pathway. It already exists and allows us to exist in the world. Where it gets in the way is when we're trying to be truly creative and not do the same thing. Here's an example of these neural pathways. A surfer gets attacked in South Africa, widely reported on the news. He actually survived, he didn't die. But people in LA stay out of the water, right? So there's no correlation between shark attack in South Africa and going to the beach in LA. But here's what's happening in your brain. A shark attack is bad. We all think would be a really bad thing. There's a superhighway neural pathway to a behavior, in this case, stay out of the water. So our brains pathologically follow these existing pathways, whether they make sense or not. Culture also conspires against new ideas. So when you get a lot of brains all thinking along the same pathways, that will conspire against innovation. The status quo acts like gravity. This line is the way things are, so things just plug along that line. Somebody has a big, bold idea. The status quo will try to pull that idea down into alignment with the status quo. Traditional problem-solving methods won't work to create this kind of radical innovation, because they exist up in that quadrant of the certain and the known. So challenges are certain, solutions are known. This is the comfort zone. This is where large organizations, corporations, religions, nations, they all like to exist up in that quadrant because it's predictable and known. We want to operate down in this quadrant of the uncertain and the unknown. So it's something we call tornado thinking. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, right? Because you don't really know where it's going. There are natural tornado thinkers like Steve Jobs, Jane Goodall in science, Bjork in music. George O'Keeffe in art, Muhammad Ali in sports, Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia, and Elon Musk, who's kind of off the rails, to be certain, but he's also a real creative thinker. And so I started thinking about how these people, there's something about them that's hardwired to be a tornado thinker. And how can we condition our brains to be equally adept at that? 2003, I started a program called Project M, where I'd gather a group of young, creative people in an unfamiliar place, and they would have to figure out a project to do, think wrong about it, and get it done in a short period of time. We've been all over the world. This is the rainforest in Costa Rica. This is New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, East Baltimore, rural Alabama. This is a project called Blank Lab, and we're at a conference in Providence, Rhode Island. This is Reykjavik, Iceland, after their financial collapse in 2008. Great project called Pizza Farm in rural Connecticut. We built horseshoe pits in Detroit in a vacant lot. This is the Gulf Coast of Alabama after the BP oil spill. So after about 10 years of running Project M, came up with this process, which we call Think NATO. And it's really I'll go back a slide. It's really these 4 simple steps, right? So it's designed to be something anybody can use. You can use it on a student project. You can use it in your own life. You can use it in a company. And it's very simple, but super effective. Brant, maybe you can take us through this.
Sure. Let's go through the 4 steps real quick, because we're going to be actually going to be doing this in our exercise today. So it starts with wait, why, and there's a reason why pausing has a profound effect on the way we think about a challenge. We're, like John said, we're really hardwired to see a problem and then immediately come to a solution. And more often than not, that solution is just a reiteration of a status quo event. And it's not necessarily the boldest path, or maybe not even close to being the right one that we should choose. So pausing, taking that moment and saying, wait, why does something exist the way there? Why are we doing the same thing over and over again, as the slide says? And so those kinds of things, that moment, that pausing, and then asking the question why, and then really going deeper. This is kind of like channeling your inner, 2 or 3-year-old. Why? Doing that as an exercise and doing that as a group will get you to a different place than when you immediately first looked at a challenge or a problem. Let's go to the next one. So the next step is maybe. And so this is where you start expanding. So you've examined the status quo, you've looked at why things are, you ask yourself, maybe it's possible to, maybe there's another way, maybe there's something that we can think of that's different. This is where we start taking away biases, and we start looking at how we look at a challenge, but from a completely different lens, and using what we did in the why challenge, the why statement a little while ago, is to come up with what we call a challenge statement. Maybe it's possible to create something completely new. So, and some of those might be, well, maybe it's possible to not drive cars. And so those are the kinds of things that we're going to be examining and playing with today. And you're going to be doing that for your own projects. So keep that in mind. The next step is pretty straightforward. It's, well, this is where we start breaking down and looking at things in a very wrong way. So this is the creative part. What if? And then you ask yourself, what if I could trick my mind into thinking wrong? What if I could actually do something? What if it was possible to? And then you start putting disassociated things together to come up with really kind of crazy ideas that could apply to it. If you start thinking about what if, and you frame it in what has been happening before, we're going to stop you, because we don't want that. We don't want that same thinking back to where it was. What if we could insert old idea here? That's not the purpose of this. And so we're going to actually have an exercise that breaks us from that neural pathway that happens very naturally. Okay. Then the last step is try this. And this is where you take those crazy ideas and say, what if I could actually just make a really small bet, a little test? A lot of people call them MVPs, minimum viable product. There's all kinds of great euphemisms that are for those kinds of things. But I like to think of it, and John and I have come up with simple words about this. Let's try this, and let's try it and see if it works. Let's test it. And we're not talking about going into a focus group. We're really talking about actually testing something in the real world. So we're going to be looking at that in a little bit later as we go into the exercise. So John, let's take us through this real quick.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you a couple projects so you can see how this works. This first one is called Not a Bike. You can see Mark O'Brien, who's on the Zoom today on the left side. And the challenge was, how do you get young people to ride bikes for everyday transportation? This was a few years ago, and it was at the beginning of this single speed fixed gear revolution that was sort of modeled on bicycle messengers. So very simple one speed bikes that don't take much maintenance. And can we get young people to ride bikes every day? This was a big newsprint piece we did to promote the project: less cars, gas, smog, paint, gears, lycra, fat, less is more. It's a revolution, you are nada. Put up a website, and the way this worked, it was you paid $100 to become a member of NADA, and your membership card that you got in the mail was a raw steel bike frame. So you got this frame in the mail, then it was all about how you built it up. You could paint it or not paint it, put whatever components on. And our thinking was that if you built your own bike from scratch, you'd be more invested in it, you'd ride it more, you'd take care of it. And we ordered, I think, 150 frames from Taiwan and sold out pretty quickly. It was time to reorder, and started thinking, this is weird. We're trying to get people out of cars onto bikes, but we're ordering these from Taiwan and shipping them over. And we had naturally grown bamboo down near our studio we had in Alabama. And I heard about this guy, Marty Odlin, who's there in the middle, who had started the Bamboo Bike Studio in Brooklyn. And he was doing workshops, taking people through the process of making their own bike. I called him up and I said, Marty, we've got this project. Can you come down and help us figure out how to do this using your technique? So you have to, harvest the bamboo, flame treat it to get the moisture out. We had this facility we called the Bike Lab with the jigs to build the bikes, and then use the Marty Odlin's process using carbon fiber tape dipped in epoxy, which looked like this. They're pretty funky looking, but they're quite strong and durable. This is Mark's bike. He came down with 3 other young people, and they built bikes and rode them from Alabama to San Francisco to promote the project. Then we decided we needed a brand. We came up with Alabamboo, trying to get out bamboo production geared up in Alabama. And it's an unbelievably sustainable crop. Then this guy got involved, Lance Rake at the University of Kansas, who said there's got to be a more elegant way of making bikes out of bamboo. They came up with this called the hex tube, which uses bamboo slats epoxied around a carbon fiber core, which allowed a stronger, lighter tube, but it's also a consistent diameter. So we could join them in a more elegant way. Started making those down in Alabama. This is the first prototype. And then did a Kickstarter campaign where we offered these called semester bikes. I think we raised about $60,000 and started making those down in Alabama. The students in Kansas kept iterating on that, kept trying different things, different configurations. This is a cool one which uses a woven bamboo around the carbon core. Looks super cool, but doesn't work at all. It's way too flexy, but it did work for fenders, and we tried it on a skateboard deck. and ended up doing another Kickstarter campaign called Beacon Alley, where we sold another $50,000 worth of this. And so you can see through the process where we start with this challenge statement, maybe it's possible to get people on bikes. We tried the steel frame, the Nada frame, then we did the bamboo frame, then the hex tube frame, which led to the skateboards, which led to creating enterprise in this depressed rural area of Alabama. So you can see how the process and constantly thinking wrong and iterating leads you to a place you could never have imagined. I'll show one more project. This is for a company called Sodastream. And this is not a student project, this is a professional one, but using the same process. And the challenge was maybe it's possible to eliminate beverage bottles and cans. So we produce millions and billions of these every year. This is the CEO, a guy named Daniel Birnbaum, who was just the most fearless CEO I've ever worked with. And one of the things that Sodastream did was they put this, they called the cage, in public areas, shows one family 5 years, how many bottles and cans get thrown away on average. They put it in the airport in Atlanta, and Coke sued them immediately for their intellectual property. You can see the Coke cans in there. And Sodastream came back and said, well, great, go pick up your intellectual property all over the world. And Coke dropped the lawsuit. A lot of times in these workshops, we bring in, we call them creative insurgents. And this is an artist from the San Francisco named Tucker Nichols, a really brilliant guy who has a professional art career, but he also loves to participate in these. And so what happens during the workshop is he's making these drawings and putting them up, right? Just what's happening is going through the mind of an artist and then being materialized on the wall. And so all these drawings came out of this Sodastream workshop. And this one really inspired us, where them is Big Soda driving around their bottles and cans in their big trucks, and Sodastream is in the hot air balloon, freeing the bubble from the tyranny of the bottle. So this really set up the basic idea for our campaign. And we produced a short video. This was to create a feeling within Sodastream on the direction the company was going. Whoops. Let's see. This may or may not run.
What is it about bubbles? We love them. From bubble machines to bubble baths, we can't get enough. Because when it comes to bubbles, there's no such thing as a crowd. Sure, a single bubble is fun, but 100 is better and 1,000 is a festival for the senses. So it makes sense that when bubbles met beverages, it was an instant love affair that over time created some of the biggest companies on earth. In those early days, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. The entire world was innocently awash in the refreshing release of bursting bubbles. Thousands of soda jerks served millions of sodas containing trillions of bubbles every day. And that's when something happened. They did it. They actually did it. The big soda companies bottled up the bubbles. At first, it seemed like it would be okay.
Biggest bottle of Coke you ever saw!
Sure, it was a little less social and a little less special, but at least it was more bubbles more of the time. So we bought it, and bought it, and bought it. We bought everything that Big Soda was selling. Until the day came when somebody looked up and noticed that we were all surrounded by empty bottles. Not millions of bottles, not billions of bottles, but trillions of empty bottles. Enough bottles every single day to reach from New York to LA. Bottles that wound up not just in our landfills, but in our oceans and rivers and parks. They fouled our water and leached poison gas into our air. Give me a Coke. We wanted bubbles, but the soda industry gave us bottles. Enough bottles to ruin just about everything. When we finally spoke up and said that something had to be done, Big Soda acted like they were oblivious to our problem. No bottle, no bubbles, they said. It's just the way it is.
Well, hey, Big Soda, we hear you. And guess what? We're not buying what you're selling anymore.
We found a new way to free the bubble from the bottle. A way to make our seas, our parks, and our air free from your mess. A way to live in a world free from your dirty bottled plants. A way to free our highways of all those logo-covered trucks spewing CO2. A way to make our bodies free of your high fructose corn syrup and aspartame.
Did you hear that?
That sound is us and about 5 million of our friends unbottling a revolution on your dirty, disrespectful, and destructive dairy air.
We are Sodastream, and we are here to set the bubbles free.
So that led to 3 Super Bowl commercials 3 years in a row. This is the first one we did, which was based on that strategy, going head to head with Big Soda. It was actually banned in England for denigrating the beverage industry.
With Sodastream, you can save 2,000 bottles a year. If you love the bubbles, set them free. Sodastream.
So I like to show those because they're actual real world examples of how this process works and how it can lead to places you could never imagine. Okay, let me escape that. Brant, do you want to show the Think NATO box at all?
Sure, real quick, because we're going to get started on our exercises. So what we've done, John and I have taken all this wrong thinking, all these ideas, and we've made a very concise kit, if you will. It's a toolkit, and we're going to be using this toolkit today. Now, if we were together, like we were last year, everybody would have one of these boxes. So we're going to actually play with the cards, and inside this box are hundreds of cards, and these cards have a variety of things on them. So what we typically start with, you heard how I talked about the steps. We have weight Y cards, and they have a word on the back, and we talk about politics in this particular case. Maybe it's possible too. And then we have a series of cards that are what if cards, and on the what if cards, we have words on the back of the what if cards, and then they get married with a black what if card that has, wait, I gotta find one that's what the black what if cards have a photograph on them. In this case, it's absurd gargoyle. Now, what we're going to be doing is using these prompts to create new ideas together as a group. Now, in your particular case, you already have a weight Y prompt. You're coming to the group with a weight Y card. You've got an idea of what you'd like to move forward in your program, your class. You've picked one of the 4 or 5. Now, if you're in the open category, we'll talk. So if you haven't set the idea, on fire yet, and you're open, then we'll work with you, and we'll come up with some other things that might be, inspiring, et cetera. But those of you who that already have a path down, down the way, you're already moving down the path with an idea, then we're going to work with you on the prompt, and we're going to come together with those prompts. We're going to go into breakout rooms, and then we're going to come back and share some of our ideas. Then we're going to go back out again, and then we're going to come back and share. So that's going to be the trajectory of the next couple of hours. Okay. John, should we get everybody started?
Yeah. So when you go into your breakout room now, what you're going to do is spend maybe 10 minutes each individually asking weight Y questions related to your topic, right? So if it's about electric vehicles, it could be, wait, why aren't we moving quicker towards electric cars? Wait, why do we even need cars? wait, why don't we have public transportation, right? So you're just asking as many why questions as you can. The more, the better. And then based on that, you'll have a conversation around those. So share your wait whys with everybody. And by the end of the breakout, you'll want to come up with a maybe it's possible to statement. So based on what's the most interesting thing that's kind of come out of the wait why, and how can you construct that into your challenge statement?
Point, it's a very important point. I don't want, please don't go back to why you're doing your project the way you've conceived it already. So if it's EV, for example, if it's electric charging stations, don't make the assumption in this particular step as to why you're doing that the way it is now. Challenge yourself to take a pause and ask yourself why all those things are. Again, go back to that sort of 3-year-old that keeps asking why over and over and over and over again. You're going to uncover something, guaranteed. You're going to uncover something that you didn't really expect when you came in today asking yourself why maybe once, because the obvious answer may not be the best one. And at the end of that, you're going to discuss that and say, well, maybe it's possible too. Now, not a solution, something big, expansive, very, very open, not a point at the end of the road, but really at the very beginning of the road. Make sense?
Yeah. So a good example is Patagonia. Recently, they came up with maybe it's possible to make worn clothes cooler than new clothes, right? And so they started a program called Worn Wear, where it's a marketplace for worn clothes. Sometimes they cut them up and rearrange them in different colors, your puffy jackets, right? So that's really thinking wrong about a clothing company, right? So that's an example of how this works. All right.
Great. So what we're going to do is, again, you're going to come back in about 10 minutes and you're going to share back your maybe it's possible too on your challenge. If you're in the open category and you're really unclear as to where you want to go, stay or go to the breakout room and then raise your hand and call somebody in. Okay. Shelley, does that sound?
It sounds great. And some of you who may have used a different email to come into the Zoom room than you've registered with, it'll take us a minute or two to get you into your rooms, but I will help that. So just bear with us and we're ready to open the rooms. Here we go.
What we're going to do now is we're going to share out by group. So amongst yourselves, figure out who's going to talk. And then maybe Shelley, if you want to just go around the room and call on each school or unit to share out their maybe it's possible statement.
Very good. Okay, let us start with Art Center. Please share us your statement.
Aaron, go for it.
I think we were focusing on transportation in Pasadena, and we were trying to figure out a way if we could change people's perception such they preferred public transportation.
Okay.
And then we actually had a second one, and that was, could we replace transportation with more digital services and experiences?
So it's an additive, or do you see that as an additive to changing the perception of, so people prefer it?
They could be put together, I think, but we sort of had two separate discussions of those topics, but yes, we thought they could also be combined.
Great.
And I hate to represent the Art Center because that's not where I am, but I hope they're okay with that statement.
Thanks, Gary. You did a good job.
Great.
Okay.
Good job.
Move to the next one, Cal Arts.
Hi, I think we did it wrong. We're really good at that because we produce about 100 maybe maybe it's possible two statements. But I would say maybe the essence of or maybe it's possible is maybe it's possible that the Pocket Park for the Pico Union project becomes a kind of like a source material for modeling lots of sustainability oriented ideas, practices. And so that, maybe it's park, would include things like maybe it's park plant nursery for gardens to get expanded along the network of alleys. Maybe it's a place where you learn how to cook with the food in the food forest in the park. And so, you're sort of like cooking and healthy eating becomes a part of, so it's like becomes a kind of radiant source of a lot of ideas. That's the closest I can do to mash it together.
Yeah, so I would phrase it as maybe it's possible to use the Pocket Park as a generator of possibilities or something like that. Right? Would that fit?
Sure. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, great. Cal Poly Pomona. Do we have anybody?
So we spent a lot of time on the why questions, and not very many on the maybe it's possible, but I'd be interested to maybe hear from Ryan or Jacinia or one of the students to just kind of shoot from the hip. And what is your maybe it's possible statement that came from our conversation?
I'll go. So I guess maybe it's possible that we relocalize production a little more to educate communities and as fundamental a level as it can as to why relocalization is advantageous, educating people about community gardens, getting them inspired or bringing them together just in some way to more facilitate just better community gardens than from the ground up, grassroots kind of thing.
Hey, John Cobb, do you, this sounds similar to some of your ideas about small farms, local production. I don't know if you want to comment on that, the value of that kind of small scale production.
Oh yes, I'm a strong believer in localizing everything, especially all necessities. I think about a lot of things in terms of crises that we're going to have. And one of the crises could well be the breakdown of transportation. So that when we import, we're dependent upon food that's grown 1,000 miles away, we just won't have it. And Los Angeles had one highway that was just blocked by a mudslide, and it was several months when it couldn't be used, or at least a couple of months. Now, of course, just one, there are others. So, it wasn't a crisis, but it's an example of the kinds of things that are going to happen more. And probably social unrest is going to be a source of strikes. Lots of things can happen. And it's going to be very important that people can feed themselves. So but in addition, it's just much healthier. You have a healthier community, individuals have better physical health. And it's so important that we have a psychological and spiritual change to the real feeling belonging to the earth, so that the people who really put their hands in the earth and know that it's full of life, and then they see the dirt that's somewhere else and it's not full of life. So, localizing and getting more people involved in the actual production of the food they eat is a win-win situation, but very, very difficult to get people interested in it.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I knew that you'd have something interesting to say about that topic and the value of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Michael, did you want to add to that?
Well, I was part of the same discussion at Cal Poly Pomona, and it seems to me that the group is continuing to invest in foodways, which is last year's project, and rightfully so. I worked with a group that was trying to implement foodways with the Pomona Sustainable Food Alliance, and I think it's a really cool idea. Their challenge, I believe, lies more in community organizing than in having a great idea. So I tried a maybe it's possible question on the group that got a little traction, but not enough to really get repeated. Maybe it's possible to get information by organizing people into neighborhoods using food to talk about creating more or better foodways. And maybe it's possible to access the neighborhoods through Cal Poly Pomona students, because they have a great idea. I think it just needs a better pathway into the community.
Well, that's going to come up in the next. So if the pathway becomes part of the execution, you'll be able to explore that. So I think these are all great, and especially when we look at localization. So I think it's I think we're really onto something there. Let's go to the next one so we can get to the more brainstorming.
Absolutely. Cal State Long Beach.
Hey, I'm one of the lone survivors of Cal State Long Beach right now. So I don't think I would represent them as a whole, but I had a really great discussion with Mark, and we were looking at some why statements in a project that I kind of am working on independently. I was really interested in Cudahy, and we had looked at sustainability as a starting point and went about, why are we not taking sustainability more seriously in the community? How does sustainability address mental health? Why is our actions for mental health reactive and not preventative? Why are we not seeing adequate mental health services? And we also looked at aspects like the digital divide. Why is the digital divide so large in Cudahy? What is a more solid transportation system that could be ushered into place? And kind of looking at it from at a little bit farther perspective, how do these all connect? So while I don't speak for Cal State Long Beach, because I don't have my entire group here, I do see that there are so many potential ways to connect access, community, transportation and mobility, and mental health services to help promote the decretion of the pandemic that is depression and anxiety, and how it's wrought through or kind of exacerbated during the corona. And in independent projects that I'm working on, I've conducted a series of interviews and see how space and time on the computer has really kind of ignited a series of this crisis. And so these are all potential avenues to explore, find connections, and address something that is a very wicked problem that has a very kind of deep core with so many tendrils kind of coming out with all these auxiliary problems.
Okay.
Great. So do you think that there you could craft a maybe it's possible statement out of some of those?
Yeah, I would say maybe there's a possibility that by finding a way to bridge the digital divide and provide these resources, we can create a system that helps mobilize transportation, thought, and community, and improve upon the well-being and mental health of that community in Cudahy, and see how that can serve as a kind of an MVP or springboard to help bring these same services into other underrepresented communities.
Great. That's the longest maybe it's possible statement ever. But it's okay, because it's basically maybe it's possible to bridge the digital divide, you know, and then all the other stuff gets packed under it. Okay, great.
Good. All right, who's next?
Al, State Northridge, please.
All right, hello everybody. I'm the only student from Northridge today, so I'm just going to go right for it. I worked with Gary Wexler and Christine Schmidt, and they were extremely helpful. Or Rebecca Schmidt, excuse me. They're extremely helpful for me. Our maybe question essentially was, you know, is it possible to completely reimagine the existing food system and infrastructure? You know, phrased a different way, can we link local communities to their food resources in completely new ways?
Great.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Okay.
Great.
Let's
keep
We
going.
have a question.
Oh,
We did have a question from Michael again, Brent.
Michael.
I don't have a question.
Oh, you got your
Sorry.
the little hand is there. That cute.
Oh, I
little-
got to put my hand down then. Sorry.
I don't know.
Okay,
The cute
That's
little-
from earlier.
It's the Zoom hand.
very good. Thank you. Okay, we're moving forward with LA Trade Tech.
Hello. I don't know if you guys could see me.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
So our maybe as possible statement was maybe we could make the pocket park into more of a, it could like also a source of like not only pride but like industry, right? So like the community could like learn skills, and also like how you guys have mentioned, to make it more like a better food readily available. And then basically that was it. Like, so to tie green space and enterprise together for the benefit of the community.
Great.
I like, yeah, maybe it's possible to create a source of learning and inspiration is really great. Yeah, nice job. Okay.
Okay, Otis, I know we have two different groups, two different statements, correct?
Since both Project 1 and Project 3 have a robust community engagement program, we did do the Wait Why for the individual groups, but I think there's some curiosity. So both are like Wait Why, what community engagement strategies have been tried in these site-specific communities, being the Pico Pocket Parks and Cudahy. So knowing what hasn't worked and what might work. Another question was, wait, why would Cudahy be incentivized to move into a green mobility plan? And also how are we going to get access to these specific communities to figure out designing for what they actually want and need in those site-specific communities. So there were a lot of questions and, wanting more information so that we're not designing for, but we're really designing with those specific communities.
That's great, Jean. Let me just jump in and speak to the one logistical question, which is a great thing about the client partners is that they are all situated right in the middle of these communities and have lots of networks and everything. And one of the reasons that we wanted to have client partners help with crafting these challenge statements is to be able to activate those networks and everything. And so as any of these projects move forward, we're delighted to help make those connections possible so that you know how to work with the community and get any of the area resources and expertise that are needed.
Great.
Great. And so Gina and Otis, I'd like to see that crafted into sort of a maybe it's possible statement that's sort of big and expansive.
Okay.
And sort of just bigger. So if you can, that'll help you in the next iteration.
Great.
Okay. Who's next?
We have Pomona
Pomona
College. Owen.
Yeah, I can go. I worked with Betsy Hunter and Aubrey Burgess, and the maybe statement we came up with was maybe it's possible, this is, I guess, a little long, but maybe it's possible to redirect funding and resources provided for non-essential services during the COVID pandemic to provide essential services coming out of the pandemic for housing and homelessness.
So redirect resources to essential services. Did I butcher that?
No, that was good.
Okay.
As in just like redirect resources that were provided for non-essential services, such as things like outdoor dining during the COVID pandemic, to resources for essential services.
Great. A little Robin Hood there. I like it.
And last for this segment is Santa Monica City College.
That's us. So it's Santa Monica College. They don't put the city in there anymore. So SMC. So myself and my student and Mark and Judith were in our group, and we came up with maybe it's possible that there be an edible native herb or herb gardens into everything, to put those kinds of gardens into everything for physical and mental well-being. So we started with why isn't there more green spaces? And then we kind of defined green spaces. And John, sorry, was in our group as well. Why is there not more of these green spaces? We took Santa Monica and talked about how Santa Monica has become this concrete jungle now. And maybe there's not land space, but there could be vertical gardens, rooftop gardens, have gardens attached to places like Home Depot or Target in their garden areas, so people become familiar with just taking food and eating it from these spaces. And yeah, that's what we came up with. And another why I have that I didn't discuss, I was wondering why the Black community is not representative in this group. I was looking through the gallery and I did not see one Black African-American student or professor. And I know a lot of this people's faces aren't on here, but I just have that question after coming out of a 2-day equity and diversion and inclusion SMC workshop.
So thanks, Victoria. I love both the way that you dealt with the challenge statement, and then also you bringing this issue of equity and inclusion here as well. Extremely important to us all. What our process has been to just issue an all call throughout about 50 California Southland colleges and universities, more than 50, and with a database of about 1,000. And then which we followed up then in multiple ways. And so then those that we're seeing here are those who've responded to the all call. But this is about half only of the schools that have responded. And we have more than 20 that have responded in various ways, saying that they're interested in various ways, but weren't able to be here today. So those who are here are the ones who showed up. And but we've been very very concerned about, interested in, and to have a very diverse group, and we're continuing to do everything we can in that way.
I just want to say that I take responsibility for that too, not reaching out to my Black students and more of my Latino students as well, and people of color students.
Well, thanks for everything that you and everyone does. Great.
Well done, everybody. I think these are terrific statements. We got it. It always takes a little while. It's kind of like a gyro, right? You get going. So we're going to jump right in. We're not going to talk anymore. So John, I think let's go to the next step, and we've got about an hour and 10 minutes left, right? Shelley, is that sort of so this is going to.
That is correct.
This is going to go pretty fast. So let's go to the next step.
Yeah, so this is really the creative engine of the process, and I would recommend that we be crazy and creative and not sort of rigorous and solving problems in ways we know that we can solve them. This is about generating alternative ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise, right? And the thinking is that if you start with this rich set of possibilities, it's better than just auguring in and starting to solve the problem. Why wouldn't you want a rich set of possibilities that you can choose from? And often the most interesting ideas are the most ridiculous, that seem crazy, but then you go, wait, we could actually smallify that and do this. And the thinking is that when you have something that's interesting, funny, unusual, that can always be pulled back to be useful and responsible. You never go from just useful and responsible to amazing and incredible. It never goes the opposite. So we want to start in this creative space. And the way we're going to do that is, Brant showed you a little earlier, with these 2-card mashups. So each team is going to get a random 2-card mashup, which is your starting place. And the point is, it will have generally no relationship to the challenge statement, the maybe it's possible, but it makes your brain start solving from a place that's completely disconnected from the problem. And that means you have to form new pathways, new creative ideas come out of this. Otherwise, we would go, our brain's superhighway to a file folder full of everything we know about electric vehicles or pocket parks or edible gardens, right? So this is forcing us to start someplace different in service of fresh ideas, okay? So let's go through each school, and Shelley, maybe you can help do that. Just announce the school. We don't need any people.
You got it. Let's start with Art Center.
Okay, so Art Center gets, if you can see that, we have deranged yoga. So that's your starting place.
Love it.
Deranged yoga. Okay, next.
Cal Arts.
Okay, Cal Arts, you get sudden gorilla. Okay, sudden gorilla.
We're very familiar.
Okay, next.
Cal Poly.
Cal Poly gets global graffiti. And these aren't necessarily to be taken literally. You can jump off from any part of that. Okay, next.
Long Beach.
Long Beach gets unlikely kiss.
Oh.
That's a sweet one. Okay, next.
Northridge.
Yummy desert. Okay, next.
Trade Tech.
Rabid art. Okay.
Otis is, I think, next.
Yes, it is.
What, Otis?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Severe surfers.
Pomona.
Rotten scream.
Sorry, screen or scream?
Scream. It's like a kid screaming into a microphone.
Can you see the image?
Next up is Santa Monica College.
Okay. Ubiquitous gallery.
Love that word. And last, we have Laverne.
Laverne has righteous dance or ballet. Looks like a ballet, righteous ballet.
Okay, so what's important about this step is John's going to take you to what you're going to do next, but I just wanted to reiterate that an image like this. So who got graffiti? Let me hold on.
Global graffiti.
Global graffiti was Cal Poly Pomona. So take the image and look at the image, and you can use it metaphorically as well. So graffiti is, I'm just going to pick on this one. Graffiti is a form of expression. It's it could be seen as street literature or rebellion, or so you don't have to use it literally. You can use it in a way that you can interpret that might inspire you on your maybe it's possible statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so an example of a project that could be in global graffiti would be Greta Thunberg and her school strike, right? So that's a form of rebellion that became a global movement. Okay, so you're going to go back into your groups, and the goal is to generate really creative ideas that start to solve your challenge, right? But remember, make it as fun and interesting as possible. Don't worry about whether it's doable at this point. That comes later.
Use those prompts as inspiration. Use those prompts and apply those and use those as the thing that you're going to frame up those ideas.
Yeah, the ideas should be different than what you would come up without the prompt.
Okay, and I think we're going to go for 30 minutes and we'll be popping in with you guys.
Yeah.
John, Brant, do either one of you just have another example of how to take a prompt and spin it out in that kind of a way?
Sure. Here, let me pull something out here real quick and see if I can do this. John, do you have one in mind real quick?
Well,
okay. Well, so
go ahead.
Here. Nobody got this. Open and sewing machine. So where this could apply in, if I'm particularly interested in equality, let's just say. So the open idea is that we remain open as humans or as a community. And for me, this idea of inclusion, if we use openness and we look at a sewing machine, the sewing machine is used to combine two pieces of material in a way that took a different form than when they were separate. So if you took a maybe it's possible statement to create more inclusion, then the open word works with inclusion, and the combining the fact that you can actually make something that wasn't like it was in its prior form together would then prompt me to come up with an idea that would allow us to craft something that didn't exist before. Does that help?
Yeah, just kind of wanting to make sure, there are enough examples that people would know exactly what to do. But
we're available, so just let us know if you want us to and keep pushing you guys, okay?
Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So if we're ready, everybody, I'm going to put you in your rooms for, go back to your rooms, 30 minutes. Have a good time. If you are alone in your room, we will bring somebody in with you shortly. Thank you very much.
Aaron has his own team. So excellent. What we're going to do now is we're going to share out where you guys were with your ideas on your what if prompts. And I can't wait to hear what you guys are all saying. John, did you want to add anything to that? You're muted there.
Please, John.
John, you're muted.
Yeah, we had a good session as well, and we generated a lot of ideas, and that's kind of the point. You don't want to have one thing yet. That's too soon. Okay,
right. So let's start. Let's start sharing out. We got about 25 minutes left, and so this might take every bit of that. Let's reserve 5 minutes for a wrap up. Okay.
Let's do it. Okay.
All right.
Let's start with Art Center, please.
Hi, everybody. So we had a great session, and our card was deranged yoga, and it's quite a crazy card. And we were looking at with public transit and making more efficient systems in the field of transportation. And we started ideating, or this is kind of questioning of what if scenarios. And in a way, when we looked at deranged yoga, we kind of figured out like what brings mental peace to people. And one particular factor was somehow owning a vehicle in a way, and that kind of led us to look at what is the most used vehicle in the US, and that was the Ford F-150. And we were like, hey, okay, what are the attributes of the F-150 that everybody or most of the people in US actually want? And we thought of, like, in terms of deranged yoga, we were like, what if you can bring the attributes of a vehicle like the F-150 into public transportation? And this in way kind of address the question of reducing car dependency. And we were looking at what is it that people actually want in terms of creating such mobility systems. And one major word was they want control and agency over any instance of this deranged world we live in. So in a way, having ownership of something or having trust on a particular system, or let's say public transportation or your vehicle, is in a way which helps to be at peace or be in a space. And our card also had a visual trigger of looking at minority communities, like people from Black, and also looking at women, and how do such systems address their concerns and make it more inclusive in a system. And the deranged yoga was helping us into looking at what if you could mentally recharge just simply equivalent to how vehicles recharge in a way? And what if public transportation pays for you when you use it? Or what if you can depend on public transportation when there are forest fires? So these were some thoughts we were looking at on how you could make this system called public transportation have the attributes of a Ford F-150. Basically, the Ford F-150 can carry goods, it can do everything, and that's what people feel comfortable and are comfortable to own it. So can people own public transportation in a way? So these were some thoughts and ideas which could bring mental peace in this deranged world. And yeah, so that's deranged yoga.
That's really interesting because most people don't utilize a truck's capabilities. It's more the idea of this kind of rugged individual. You've got this big, powerful machine, and you can throw crap in the back, even though you never really, you're not a contractor, you'll never use it. The car companies have promoted that. They've really grabbed onto this American idea of the rugged individualist, with their big truck. And I love how you guys are thinking, well, how can we take that motivation? What is it about the truck, that people want? And how can we make public transportation provide that? I think that's a really good insight. There's really kind of rich material to work with there. I love that idea, because public transportation at this point is almost the opposite. Like it's giving up control. It's giving up your own kind of image as an individual, right? And so flipping that upside down is a fascinating question. I like that.
We could probably have the most yoga studios in the back of everyone's truck in Montana.
We actually had one last idea which we looked at equity in marketing in a way. We know that private automobile companies spend billions of dollars in marketing their vehicles. And we just put the question, what if that same amount of money is spent on marketing public transportation? What would happen? Like, when people start using more public transportation? Like, can we bring equity in marketing was one concept as well.
I like it.
Yeah, those are great.
Wonderful. Next school, Cal Arts.
Yeah, I think our crew is going to sort of share. We sort of wrote a story.
Of course you did.
Garrett, did you want to jump in first, or Brooke?
So
we had a very good discussion about sudden gorilla.
Your prompt was sudden gorilla.
Sudden gorilla, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we got really excited about a lot of the attributes of that. Just to say generally before they jump in, just that gorillas as living in connected families, gorillas as megafauna, top predators in the jungle, but what that enables in terms of the rest of the ecosystem, gorillas as seed dispersers, and suddenness is like, how long do you have to wait? Parks take just impossible amounts of time. There are these promises to the communities and they take forever, and then it's just a field of grass. And so how can you get in there right away and smash it up and try something? Garrett, did you want to jump in?
Well, I decided to try his food in a new location because I think the reason he's attacking me is because the food situation, and the reason he's been needing me to watch him eat is because the food situation is just not tenable for him over there. So I'm trying the food over here, and I moved the plant into the bathroom, which
I think that plant's too tall in there.
I agree.
I think that one actually makes that.
I'm not sure if either of them are right for that spot. I think what we need in there is like a little table, actually. Maybe we could put, I would say we could put that plant over there, but then it's gonna, I think, might be too cluttered over there. I don't know.
Wait, what is happening right now?
We had an unmuted phone, which has been taken care of. So Shannon, please.
Sorry, that wasn't part of our story. I was just checking.
I'd like to double check on where that plant goes, just to make sure.
Yeah, right. Just to make sure it's in the right place. Okay. I know we got a lot of schools to get through. I'm going to pass it off. I'm going to try again. Round 2. Garrett, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So pretty much just starting it off with like the idea of gorilla and just going down there, say today, with some sledgehammers and just start breaking cement and planting some seeds. Yeah.
So the story we kind of wrote, yes, we started to think about it as like, what if somebody lived on the edge of this neighborhood, and they, and so here, wait, I'm gonna actually try to find it and maybe read a little bit of it. All right, hold on, sorry about this. So I live on the edge of this neighborhood. I've heard there are these captains and there's some preparedness plan, but I don't really know what the total deal is. And I have a kid and I work elsewhere, but I like living here. I don't know a ton of my neighbors yet, but I noticed a series of small, cool things starting to pop up in the alley, kind of like breadcrumbs, little art actions, maybe some mirrors and prisms, almost like making a path towards some central place. And then at some point I start to see these projections on buildings. And it's almost like they're flyers, but without the waste. And one of them has a big picture of a sledgehammer and it's inviting me to an event. just has a date and a place and a big picture of sledgehammer. And I learned from my Block captain that this neighborhood is actually part of this developing synergistic energy, and that there might be a new park coming. So I show up, I'm curious, on the right date and time, and a group of local folks, my neighbors are there. We sign waivers and we start breaking up the concrete all day long. It's really cathartic. We just bash it up. Feels like it represents destroying racism and destroying oppression and destroying a lack of economic opportunity and systematic white supremacy and all of the shit that's in our lives, and we just bust up the concrete. And there's food trucks there, and they have free food all day long and free drinks. And we get to the end of the day, and there's just this big patch of dirt, and we plant one tree. It's a fruit tree, and then the park grows. It almost becomes a playground in the way that it's laid out, and has an expansive canopy. It feels like this beautiful jungle. Someone picks the fruit, bakes a pie, brings it back the next day. People start making extensions of the park and the jungle on their balconies. Vines grow. We do a monthly dinner in the park, what's made from stuff we grew. Vines stretch out, cleaning the air. We start getting invitations from other neighborhood groups to come and show them what we did, and how local artists do chalk drawings on the sidewalks to invite people to the alleys. The kids are so into it. And now people in the area are really starting to get connected to how to grow food, and what the importance of clean air is. And this idea of the urban jungle is transformed. That's our story.
Nice.
Okay.
I like the story.
Ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Cal Poly Pomona.
We never really picked anyone to report back. So ours was global graffiti. We had a pretty wide-ranging conversation on this. I think one aspect of the conversation that we focused on was community engagement and how to legitimately reach the community, right? And you know, there's some additional issues because of the pandemic, right? And you know, does that tie our hands, or you know, does it open up other opportunities? We talked a lot about youth as well, and about connecting with youth, you know, through social media, as well as some guerrilla gardening ideas, etc. So I guess back to gorillas. Different one. So I may leave it at that, but if anyone else from Cal Poly Pomona wants to bring anything else up, that's great.
Yeah, I bring something up. Thanks, Aaron, for that. Yeah, just global graffiti. Just riffing on that, we talked about how to make bigger impact, or using social media to make our stories and foodways more known. You know, think global, act local, and graffiti. There's a lot of talk about pop-up foodways, trying to also create moments and a meaningful community building and enriching activities somehow. Trying to think about incentivizing that participation, and you know, creating community from people from all over the globe. And you know, just the tying graffiti, just Pomona has a great rich history of street art and culture, and it's very expressive. So you know, the Cal Poly Pomona team definitely is trying to expand on getting more appeal and reaching out to more folks. And I think global graffiti is maybe an oxymoron, but you know, we work with the contradictions and paradoxes. So Let's just take it to the streets. A lot of people talking about direct action. With guerrilla gardening coming up a lot. Examples of successful gardens in Pomona that were just acted upon versus going through, somewhat bureaucratic or permit processes that would waylay the action. So yeah, for everyone, thank you for sharing. And that's what I have to say. So thanks for giving me the time.
Great.
Okay. These are wonderful. The next one is Long Beach. Joshua Ian, I believe. Getting a lot of kudos, by the way.
So I can't say that I represent Cal State Long Beach in this statement, but this exercise is kind of based off a product that I'm doing that may have potential to take off. So my prompt was unlikely kiss, and I looked at an intersection of three things that could come together that would be very unlikely: mental health, community engagement, and sustainability. And trying to find that really beautiful niche spot in the middle as to where all these come together, I explored a couple of the ethnographic interviews I conducted and research into games as critical technologies, which is basically interactive design, and community co-creation to meet a bottom line. And after discussing it with Eugene, it seems like there's really strong potential to create this community engagement kit that leverages pre-existing spaces that we can conduct activities like we're doing here with this card game. And we would modify it basically to start addressing aspects of professional development, mental health to deal with stress and anxiety, and then how we could change our environment through actively like engaging with this greater narrative of Cudahy. So like a game, we would give Cudahy a score. And through community engagement and participation, the score would go up every once in a while. And then the way that this score would go up is by distributing this kit at these locations and working with key partners to help bridge elements that are necessary. And in this kit, we would have a way to conduct data collection from this game. And this would help stimulate value co-creation, sustainability, address ways to take care of oneself mentally, physically, and ultimately how to do it in a sustainable way. One of the things that happens with Cudahy is that there's a big transportation issue. And if you can't get out of the city, how do we bring these elements to you? And if we leverage these pre-existing places and we create this kind of game, we're reducing the carbon footprint by allowing people to walk, engage, and socialize into these pre-existing spaces. And as they're pop-ups, they can transform and help regulate methods that are COVID safe. And these could also transition into later post-COVID era where we're able to gather again and be able to really engage each other in this community space. And so in leveraging these spaces, we can conduct educational tutorials and games through role-playing and simulation as to how we would see what we can do to elevate Cudahy. And as we continue to do this with younger audiences and youth, they start making a conversation that really kind of like brings parents and adults into seeing these transitions and the potentiality of transforming Cudahy and start adopting habits. So this becomes a big behavioral change, and not only taking care of oneself, but taking care of the environment and really making a change. And through these kits, we can go ahead and assess the needs of the community members. We can collect data to see what's really important and what's really valued. And through the act of role play and creation, we not only create with the community, but we have tangible aspects or virtual worlds that can go ahead and inform what is needed and where the community would like to head. And that creates a lot of value for the city. And then that could be an extension in bringing in attention and resources into Cudahy, which then could be used as a kind of platform to leverage into other cities that are facing similar problems. So at the moment, this is basically a kit about engaging the community and to value co-create with the city. And this addresses, in this kit is a pop-up, a series of games that are low technology, accessible, fun, and can scale with partnerships with places like Human IT that are bridging the digital divide. The county and other key partners. It could start scoring the city and seeing visible progress to see where the Cudahy has been, where it's going, and where it is. And it creates a narrative that is engaging, inclusive, and accessible, and it provides a lot of data and value to see what this case study could bring, not only to Cudahy, but to a lot of other cities as well. And that's my spiel.
I like it. Expansive.
Wonderful.
Good. Let's keep going.
Yes, we have Northridge.
All right, so ours was Yummy Desert. So right off the bat, it was, immediately think of food deserts, but we kind of wanted to break it down. So we thought of deserts as, what is a desert? Barren, beautiful, biblical, dry, isolated, it's lonely, no water, limited resources, responsible or in part coming out of climate change. We also kind of touched on diversity deserts, this idea that, there are deserts of diversity. And then we looked at Yummy. Yummy is this idea of community, happy, festivals, filled with life, kind of uplifting. So how do you combine the two? So we looked at kind of celebrations of yumminess that would have developed from the desert. So kind of this storytelling of how we went from desert and barrenness to this yummy, exceptional community-based life, and kind of celebrating that with physical celebrations of sharing, symbiotic interactions. And then in terms of just actually bringing that to light, we kind of looked at, can we have an event centered around political correctness in the garden, or around the idea of the soil being a spiritual entity filled with life? We looked at kind of what potential interactions between Yummy and desert there could be. So I'll leave it at that.
Good mashup.
Absolutely.
Great.
Next up is LA Trade Tech.
So our word was rapid art. And we were thinking rapid is like extreme, like violent, passionate, something that stands out, art that stands out, and like something that's unforgettable, something that you'll remember and makes a long lasting effect. And so we were thinking we can bring this within the community, like bringing a community together with different art, such as art gallery, like in parks or green spaces, to show how important like nature is and how important bringing the communities together. And we could do art workshops where people can create their own art, and incorporating technology with plants, because there's certain way with technology that you can make sound with the plants. And as well, we were thinking of billboards that brings attention to bringing the community together, and how important nature is, and green spaces in general, such as parks. Yeah, just art like that in general that stands out and makes a long lasting effect.
Very good. Thank you. Next up is Otis.
Hi, we got severe and surfing. So we came up with in severe make us think of intense, emergency, crisis, and surfing about connection, nature, waves, and community. So the maybe we came up with was maybe we can create a long-term engagement strategy through waves of clean technology, information, and sculpture.
And then we have team 3.
Yeah, so our words are severe and surfers. For severe, we thought about like something urgent, and we were able to think of surfers as waves. So our statement is to deal with future urgent issues by dividing the issues into small waves or categories. And like, for example, like the park design, park safety, ways to help the location's gentrification, and also community engagement.
Great.
Very. Thank you, Otis. Next up is Pomona.
Yeah, so we our word was rotten screen. So first up, we talked about how a rotten screen could be interpreted as a screen by those who say direct their anger towards the wrong things, maybe against the well-being of their community in favor of maybe like only their own personal comfort. And then we used the word rotten screen to talk about like the idea of a rotten system and how things and inequities that continually worsen over time are similar to something rotting that you actually don't always see, and the parallel between something molding and decaying and how you might not see something at the onset, but also the idea that things that are rotten are not necessarily beyond repair. After all, compost is rotten, and compost can be used to feed gardens. And I guess this is very kind of like it's metaphorical, but we talked about how we can just like plant a garden and like a massive bed of compost.
Very good. Thank you, Owen. Next up is Santa Monica College.
I just want to start off and say that if it wasn't for me stepping into the unknown and staying primitive, all these ideas that came today would not be possible. And our words were ubiquitous gallery, which ubiquitous means found everywhere, seen. And a gallery is a room where art is sold or shown. And, I think that the biggest challenge that has really popped out to me has been, and our group and all of us in general, has been community organizing to bring people together. So when we started talking more about, what can be seen and portrayed as art, we came across things like upcycling, getting companies involved to give us their products, plastics maybe, and introducing these workshops that can potentially create maybe, we were talking about garden beds where we can grow food, give the homeless some form of task or engage in the community in that way where they're not necessarily having to go to a food bank or rehab or a place that they don't want to go, because a lot of these people like to live on the street. So what this creates is a opportunity for them to come and experience something new, something sustainably good for the environment, and learn a new set of skills, and that creates jobs and community. Also, we were talking about eco parks, how that can be brought into making them into recycling centers. And yeah, that was mostly our things that we got with Ubiquitous Gallery.
Great.
Oh. Brant, are you going to present Laverne and wrap it up?
So Laverne came in late. They didn't have a maybe it's possible statement. So we hadn't quite got as mature as all the rest of you had. So the conversation I had with Jay Jones is very interesting. He's part of the Center for Common Good out at Laverne. And so our prompt was righteous ballet. And so Jay immediately sort of jumped in the idea of righteousness being something that's held, and he spoke a little bit about how Laverne was formed by a brotherhood and the goodness that came out of spirituality, etc. And then the ballet was life is a ballet, and sometimes you dance on time and sometimes you don't. And this isn't exactly Swan Lake. This is something that's rather expressive and unique. And so they're very interested in community gardens and supply chain and things about localized food. And so there's Michael's gone, Michael Whitner's gone, but they're very interested in partnering with somebody out in Pomona because they have several things going on in Pomona. So Eugene, I think that there's an opportunity to do a mashup between Laverne and maybe another party that is going to participate, a little bit more formally. Great conversation. Jay is a really interesting guy. So that was Laverne.
That's all our schools today, Eugene. Or Brant and John, anything else to say?
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things. It's unfortunate we're not together to do this because there's a dynamic that happens in person that we can't do on Zoom. So unfortunate for that. But I think, what you can take away from this is sort of the tools to kind of push your ideas farther and out of the unexpected, or out of the expected to the unexpected, right? So, maybe something came out of this that kind of spurs you to change your project or move it in a certain way, and maybe it doesn't, but you sort of get a feel for the Think NATO process and the value of that.
Yeah, and I'll real briefly, well done, everybody. John said it perfectly. There's really nothing that's expected from this process other than sort of getting out of your comfort zone. And if you can stay there, you'll find a path to something that's just, typically very unique. And we look forward to hearing what you guys do with your proposals that are going to come pretty soon. And then certainly as the things progress into Pando days. So I'll turn it back to you guys. Thank you for participating and being so open today.
Thank you all, and John and Brant, and yeah, thanks tons to all of the schools that were here. So just a couple minutes more. Where are we in the Pando Days 21 process? Now we're looking to the schools to choose at least one challenge where you think you could make a creative contribution over the rest of this year and focus on writing that up in a single one-page draft. Get those drafts to us by April 15, tax day. I think we have 11 schools, something like that were here today, with something like another 10 that weren't ready or able to join but are interested in submission. Again, you can submit in multiple categories at this stage if you'd like. You may propose collaborations. Once we get the ideas in mid-April and sort through them, we'll get back to you within 11 days by April 26 to let you know if your project has been accepted for going forward. Early May, we'll then host a series of half-hour online events to introduce you to the client partners in the categories you've chosen, introduce you to resources you may find helpful, open up our own CSO network of chief sustainability officers, many of whom would be happy to advise. Over the summer, small research grants will help selected school teams push their ideas forward and prepare full courses, labs, or studios to take them up in the fall. And then, of course, we'll have the project premieres at the end. If you have any questions, make sure you check out the Pando Days 21 webpage or send us an email. Tons of thanks to you, John and Brant, for bringing this Think NATO process to us virtually. It's been really, really wonderful to be through this with you today. Many thanks again to all of the schools who participated, to our esteemed client partners, the County of Los Angeles, the City of Cudahy, the City of Los Angeles, the Pasadena region, Pico Union Housing Corporation, and the Cobb Institute located in the Pomona Valley. Again, many thanks to the Chief Sustainability Officer Strategic Task Force for LA County. And let me express my thanks to the Pando Days 21 team, Judith Parker, creative consultant, producers Shelley Goldstein and Betsy Hunter, designers Michael Braley, Mark O'Brien, and Aubrey Burgess, and support from Linda Estrada. Pando Days is a program that's produced in collaboration with the CSO Task Force and made possible in part by the Conrad and Hilton Foundation. Thank you all for joining us again. Stay safe and have a great afternoon.